See you later. All right, good morning. This is brought to you by a sensory learning program. It's a natural solution to brain injuries, making sense of it. So let's get started. All right, so who am I? I'm a neurocognitive optometrist here at Arizona Vision Therapy Center here in Tucson, Arizona. I've been doing this for about 10 years now, and it just gets more exciting every year because I keep learning new things. We originally started with vision therapy alone. We worked with a lot of developmental issues where people weren't learning how to use their eyes to work together as a team, and we got to teach them to do that. And a lot of times we had brain injuries who had forgotten how to get their eyes to work together as a team. So they're having all kinds of headaches and problems reading, problems driving. So we did some good things like that. We also found that using therapeutic lenses to help them feel more comfortable, to get their eyes to be less stressed, ended up helping the situation. But there was still that little bit of, it was fight or flight type issues that we couldn't tap into with the vision therapy and the therapeutic lenses as well. So we brought that one in late 2017, and we've been having some really good successes with it, and I'd love to share that with you. So who would want to be listening to this talk? Anybody who's feeling anxious, tired, frustrated, worried, scattered, less intelligent than they were before their brain injury. In fact, this is actually good for people who haven't had brain injuries that they're aware of. It's just, this one really brings it together after brain injuries. Common thoughts of patients that come through here. I'm so overwhelmed in noisy environments. I'm so distractible. I just need to find a way to increase my attention span. I need to figure out how to decrease my anxiety. Something is just not connecting. So, typical progression of a brain injury. There is no typical progression of a brain injury because nobody is built the same and nobody goes into a brain injury with the same stuff on board. So, the mainstream medical community says, hey, let's just sit on this for about 6 months and see what the brain does. And most of the time the brain does figure itself out and it does reorganize. But what if it doesn't heal on its own? What if it doesn't reorganize? What if it partially heals? They've actually found in a lot of recent studies that 15% of just first-time concussions have this thing called post-concussion syndrome, where you have all of those issues of problems with movement, problems with lights, problems with sound, problems with cognition, getting it together. So that's just with the first-time concussions. It's almost, it actually increases every concussion you have after that. So what does make it harder to heal? Fight or flight. That's a big one. Okay, so if you get hit in the head, your head doesn't want to get hit again. So it's going to set up a defense mechanism to avoid getting hit again. When your head goes into fight or flight, your body, then you end up having problems with hormones, resting, digesting, detoxing, dealing with your emotions, concentrating, and integrating your senses. So say if you think back caveman style, if a tiger was chasing you, who cares about your hormones? Who cares about sleeping? Who cares about eating? You definitely don't care about detoxing. That's something for later after you get back in the cave. Emotions, the only emotions you're going to have is fear, anxiety, and frustration. You're definitely going to have problems concentrating because the only thing you've got is, okay, I'm going to die. And then the integration of the senses. Your senses tend to be hyper aware of everything, and they have a hard time decreasing that awareness because it might be a tiger, right? So let's go into all the things that the fight or flight can affect. So the hormone imbalance, you are going to see the gamut. Most people who make it into my office, they're already on some thyroid medication because thyroid is a hormone that regulates heat. Who cares how hot you are when you're running and fighting, right? A lot of times they're on some form of anxiety or depression type medication, and they have problems with testosterone and estrogen and all of the hormones that are needed for the slower functions, the healing functions, the regulating functions. They all get set aside and put on the back burner. as this person is trying to survive. So there's a lot of dysregulation in moods when they come in here. All right, problem sleeping. So to heal, you need to sleep. You need to sleep well. To sort out what you've learned that day, you need to sleep well. You need to dream through it. You need to organize it. If you don't have that, then you end up having problems with fatigue. You have problems remembering things. You have problems concentrating on things, learning new things. Problems digesting. Yet again, who cares about digesting when you're running for your life? So when you can't digest, even though you're still eating, when you can't digest, you end up, instead of having nice small particles that you can package up and put in your brain, like all the neurotransmitters, all the things that help you feel full and happy and in the moment, they don't get up to your brain. You end up with these large particles. They're kind of ground up, but not entirely. And these particles are irritating to the gut. So they end up leaking out the gut, and that's where you get almost like a beer belly. You get that inner tube around your stomach area, and you become allergic to more things. You become inflamed. You just become miserable because your body, once these particles start leaking out of your gut, your body interprets those as more of the enemy, a foreign body that they need to get out. So that's where you get the inflammation. And the problems detoxing, I want to go into this one a lot because a lot of things you don't think of as toxic become toxic if they're stuck in your body too long. So medications. So if your liver, your kidneys, your intestines, all of those are not getting the toxins out like they need to, medications are going to respond differently than mainstream. Anesthesia. Every time you have any kind of surgery, the anesthesia will probably stick around longer. And if you think about anesthesia, that's something that absolutely gets across the blood-brain barrier. And if it's stuck in your brain for long periods of time, it's going to block a lot of the transmissions between your nerves. Alcohol already messes with oxygen levels. And if you can't get rid of those toxins, they're going to mess with you later. Pesticides, herbicides, food dyes. I'm talking even the yellow dye in pickles can mess with you. Preservatives. MSG is one of the big ones. It causes an extreme stimulation in your brain. The fake sugars, so anything aspartame, that type of thing can just wreak havoc on your brain. And heavy metals. And I'm talking heavy metals like aluminum that you get in your deodorant, fluoride you get in your toothpaste. All of these things in small levels that you can detox regularly tend to become toxic, and they cause more problems in your brain and your body. So not dealing with emotions. Who cares about emotions when you're chasing a tiger's chasing you, right? Well, a lot of people around you don't understand that. They don't understand what you're going through because they're not going through it themselves. So you become frustrated, they become frustrated, and there goes your support network. So one of the big things that you do to help heal is you express what's messing with you and not repress it. Well, after a brain injury, you tend to get a lot of repression until everything explodes, and then everybody hears about it. Multitasking can make it harder to heal. We got a lot of people coming through here. They've had multiple brain injuries because they can't rest. They say, I can't rest. I have to go back to the job. I need it. I got to get her done. And when they do that, they don't give themselves time to heal and to reorganize like they need to. And then they just become overwhelmed and less productive. What else? Okay, sensory integration problems. So this is that I was talking about not being able to regulate the sight, sounds, and all that other stuff coming in. So if you think about it, when you're on a typical day and you haven't had a brain injury, when there's a loud noise and you know that loud noise is going to be there a while, but you have to pay attention to somebody talking, you actually have the ability to modulate that loud noise so it becomes background information. You can ignore it. Well, when you have a brain injury, every sound, every sight, every touch, and every change is magnified. I call this the fire hose effect. Everything is coming at you very, very intensely. You can't ignore it. You can't turn it down. And that's where you end up seeing a lot of people, they try to avoid that type of situation, which doesn't bode well for social interactions, right? And then a lot of the times you got these fire hoses, you got all these different fire hoses, and they're not matching. Just like if you were trying to watch a movie where the lips and the voice didn't match, you notice how you can't sit and watch and listen to that movie at the same time for very long. That same exact irritation, that same exact problem with integration occurs. Now, other things that happen, a lot of times, like say for vision, if you're having problems with that, then you have a hard time getting your eyes to point to the same place at the same time, and you end up with double vision, blurry vision, vision that gives you headaches. Sometimes it actually, no, not sometimes, quite a bit of the time it messes with driving too, because you don't feel safe knowing where you are. And things are coming at you that could cause damage, right? So the sensory connections themselves, this is kind of a simple drawing. I wish I had the other one that went left to right and front to back, but I'm going to talk about this one right here. That little structure in the middle, like almost directly in the middle right there, that is almost like Grand Central Station. That's the part that takes all of the senses and it makes them match. So we know that light and sound do not travel at the same pace, right? Well, did you notice when you're doing something, it appears like they match? It appears that you're hearing something as you're saying it, like if something drops to the floor. Well, if something goes on with that structure right there, and that structure is very vulnerable to any kind of head injury, then you're going to have a problem matching those senses. So say if something drops on the floor in one location, sometimes you can actually hear it in a completely different location at a completely different time. So not only was that one occurrence traumatic to the system, something that got you into fight or flight further, you also have another one in the environment. They didn't match. You can't tell where anything's coming from. That sticks you up in fight or flight and makes it really hard to get back down. The modulation we already talked about, where you're having a really hard time ignoring things. And then sensory motor, you tend to just, when you reach for things, things aren't where you thought they were. Walking's not as easy. Talking's not as easy. Anything that involves your muscles, you sending a signal to those muscles is a little bit rougher, especially sharing between the right and left sides of the body. Okay, so if there's problems with all of those, you're going to see problems with attention, emotional response and memory, thinking, making associations. And look at that. That's that structure I was just talking about. And motor planning. So some of the observable behaviors when you have problems with sensory integration. And it's funny because people automatically think brain injury when they see these anyway, but they don't realize it's not, that it's fixable. That's the part that I want you guys to realize. You see problems with attention. You either have very slow, these are the ones that want to stay on their couch all day long. They want to avoid anything that has to do with the senses. And then you've got the hyperactive. They want to go to the clubs. They want to drink some alcohol. They want to dance. They want to get out there. You got sensory avoiding, sensory seeking, hyper-focused, and easily distracted. So, and the funny thing is, you can go to both ends of the spectrum on this one. All right, and other behaviors for the sensory integration problems include unreasonable anxiety. And now that you've heard everything I've got to say, it's not that unreasonable, right? You have problems with social interactions, feeling like a failure, because a lot of the times you can't hear the conversation, you hear parts of it. And when you hear the parts, you don't get the full picture, you don't understand what's needed of you, you say the wrong thing. They have problems handling changes. They appear very disorganized or clumsy. So what do we do these days to try to help handle these sensory issues? Especially when there's a brain injury, you hear therapy almost immediately. So these guys are getting put into physical therapy, vision therapy, occupational therapy, all of these therapies. They're learning all of these tools at a level that's a lot higher than they need. They need a more fundamental level. A lot of times, if they don't have that fundamental stability to be able to learn these new skills become splinter skills. So we help with the foundation of all of this. so that they have the ability to remember everything that they learned from then on. And what's really nice, people who've been in therapy before they do the sensory learning table, they actually start to put it together. Because what they learned, it's still in their brain somewhere, they just can't access it easily. All right, we also have people who are in counseling. Now, here's the thing. Remember, fight or flight. If a tiger's chasing you, do you want to sit down and talk about your feelings? Do you want to sit down and talk about what you had for breakfast? No. Just accessing the words is more difficult than it was before the brain injury. And then we have medication. Now, a lot of the medications, so like the ADHD medication, the main mechanism you see with these guys is they're stimulants. They give your brain more energy to be able to deal with overwhelming situations. Well, the problem is you can't be like that forever. You're going to end up crashing. So this is also something you don't want to be on forever, because you want to be able to handle those situations without having to juggle them so intensely. So we found some effective methods of dealing with the sensory integration. Nutrition is definitely a big one. If you do not have the right chemicals and molecules and all that in your brain to be able to provide the nutrients and get rid of the waste products that are occurring in your brain, then there's going to be problems. So I definitely want to say nutrition is one of the big ones. Okay? Quite a few of the people that come in here, they're sucking back the big gulp. They're trying to eat as much sugar as they possibly can because they need energy. But there's other ways to get that energy that are not going to cause problems with the brain. So let's go on to what we're mostly focusing on today, and that's sensory integration training through the sensory learning program, which is a multimodal type of training. So it's not just vision therapy, it's not just motor therapy, it's not just auditory therapy, it's everything all at once. So some of the things that you're going to notice that a lot of patients in the past have noticed improve from this program, they have a better time articulating and sequencing sounds. Speech, being able to read, being able to understand what you read, has a lot to do with mixing sounds and symbols together. Locating the direction of sounds, moving with a sense of rhythm, and being able to sequence events in time. Before they come in here, they tend to be the ones who stick their keys in the fridge and they get the milk out and decide to go try to start the car with the milk. Whoa, whoa. And then they have to go back and fix everything. Visual vestibular problems, catching a ball. You have to be in the right place at the right time and catch it with a certain amount of power. All of those things become dysregulated when you have a brain injury. Riding a bike, artwork and handwriting, balance and center of gravity. Math concepts are big. You need to understand space and time simultaneously for you to be able to do well in math and to be able to move in space. A lot of these people are tripping on curbs. They're parking to the side a little bit. They're just not comfortable. They're in their shopping carts. They veer to a certain side. The visual auditory problems, being able to think in words and pictures, grasping abstract concepts, cause and effect is a big one. After a brain injury, you will see a lot of problems with what I call common sense. Realizing that if you do a certain action, that there's going to be a consequence to it, and then having to live through the consequence. Reflecting on past events and connecting them with what's occurring now. Relating letters to sounds, so reading. Reading comprehension, and the ability to visualize what you read and think. So the sensory learning program, what it is, it's a table, and you lay on this table, and you see that little box above that boy's head right there. So he's staring at the box. There's a certain color of light that's up there, and he's got these headphones on to help integrate his auditory. And this table, it rotates in a circle, up and down, and side to side. What's really fun about this, here's a fun fact, Mary Bowles actually developed this for her son who had special needs. He was born in 1975, and there wasn't a lot out back there to help special needs kids. So she went out and she actually created this. And she found that just doing one thing at a time did not completely get everything resolved. Doing everything at the same time definitely pushed things forward. So she developed this program by talking to all the experts in their fields on light, sound, and motion. So it was originally designed to help with learning and behavioral problems, but she found that, wow, there's a lot of brain injury situations. There's a lot of other problems with anxiety, fight or flight type things that are being helped with this program. The sensory learning program connects multiple areas of the brain simultaneously. So you got top to bottom, left to right, front to back. It engages all the senses simultaneously. So you got vision, auditory, and vestibular. So it's more real life. It's not like you're going to watch a movie and suddenly decide to take out the auditory, the hearing. It's more real life. The brain loves real life, so it ends up taking that situation and building on it. It's a controlled sensory experience in a prepared environment. So it's really cool. You put yourself on that table, and it's going to be a dark room that's nice and safe. You have control of the light source, so if you get spooked in any way, you can turn it back on. It's very calm. You got the steady rotation of the table. A lot of people that come in here, they're worried that their motion sickness will flare up if they get on this table. The thing that's really cool about this is the table is a constant speed. So if you can get in a car that's moving straight ahead, going at a constant speed without throwing up, then you should do fine on this table. It's a non-cognitive approach, so you don't have to sit and talk about your feelings unless you want to. Then we send you to a counselor. You don't have to listen to a lot of instructions. Just lay there, keep the headphones on, and stare at the light. It doesn't take a lot of motivation. You do have to stay awake, and we have people there to help you with that. And it's a relatively quick time commitment. It jumpstarts development and healing. It's a foundational intervention, and it has lasting results. So most people do not need to do this again unless they have another brain injury. And we do it again, we reorganize everything, and they move on. I'm going to very briefly talk about the visual field. So a lot of times when people think about vision, they think about 20/20. I'm talking about a whole bunch more than 20/20. You've got to get your eyes to be able to see the entire field. You have to know what is important to look at. You have to get both eyes to work as a team, focus, everything in there. And if that's off, you've got headaches, you've got strain, and you've got problems making contact with your eyes. So when people first come in here, they tend to have visual fields that are nice and tiny like this. So they look like that, okay? So when you do that, it's going to be really hard to make a decision on what's important because you have to spend your whole day scanning through your environment to make sure that you've got the whole picture. Once they get through the training, then they start to get a much bigger visual field. And this tends to help with a lot of the cause and effect type things, decision-making type things. The listening profile. We are not audiologists here, but we have found that there's patterns in the listening profile, especially after a brain injury. There tends to be certain frequencies that are oversensitive. A couple they have problems even hearing. So it's like everybody's talking like this and they're having a really hard time understanding them. So we take that and we smooth it out so they have the ability to hang on to conversations longer. Their speech becomes more fluent and easier to understand. Fine motor skills. Oh, well, we have seen all kinds of things happen after a brain injury. This one is actually a kid, but I have actually seen adults write like this on the left-hand side. So after completing the program, this is 8 months after starting the program. Look at how all the letters start to go back on the line and it becomes much more fluent. All right, being able to actually draw well. I've had so many patients come in here that I actually recommend they become artists afterwards because their skills do pick up that well if they had it before they started. So I'm going to very quickly go through over some notable improvements that have occurred in the program so far. Increased ability to prioritize, so things don't become as overwhelming. Multitasking, communicating effectively, relating well to others, managing time, coping with busy environments. And that's just school and work. Now let's talk about home. Relationships tend to get a whole bunch easier because you actually hear what your spouse is saying to you. You understand what needs to be done, and you actually have the energy to do it. Communication, time management improves. Sleep patterns, because you're out of fight or flight. Appetite tends to get better, and it tends to be more towards healthier foods. Tends to. Recreation is a lot easier because you have the energy and you can handle loud, like, surprises. Cognition, we've seen some really good improvements in focus, attention span, decreased distractibility, short-term memory, visual processing, auditory processing, and the ability to learn new things. Emotional has improved drastically. Tend not to be as reactive. Like, say, if somebody tries to cut you off in traffic, it's not a, what are you doing? Oh my gosh. It's more of a, boy, you really needed to get to work early today, didn't you? Okay, I'll let you go. Self-esteem is all wired into this. Energy levels tend to improve. You get more responsive, emotional, because you have time to back off and actually think about your emotions. The general emotional tone, it just tends to be more stable and easier to handle by the people around you. Ability to cope with stress tends to improve, and you don't get that sense of overwhelm every time you open your eyes and wake up every morning. So the Sensory Learning Program, it's relatively quick. It's 12 days in office, 18 days at home, so 30 days total. We bring you in and we do some testing to make sure you're a good candidate for the table. You do 12 consecutive days. So each day you do 2 sessions, and they're 30 minutes each. There's a 15-minute break in the middle just to make sure you get up and you don't have to go to the bathroom and all that. And then after that, you got the 18 days of the portable light kit. And what I love about the light kit, it's not just you staring at this stationary light that is extremely boring. It's almost, I call it a jellyfish. It's the light goes on, the light goes off, and you get sucked into it. You just want to stare at it. And you do that 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes at night. Then we bring you back for the 1 month, 3 month, and 6 month follow-ups to make sure everything is progressing like it's supposed to. So the program itself, I compare it to cleaning your house. All right, so after brain injury, everything that you had been trying to remember, you pretty much threw into the back of your head and hoped you could find it later. Well, you end up with this hot mess over on the left here. The program starts out where the first couple days, it's you taking stock of what you have, planning on what you want to do and preparing. Now, about halfway through, that's when you start actually pulling out all of that information. And I'm talking stuff that has been bugging you since you were 2 years old. Muscle memory from when you broke your leg. The feeling that somebody had abandoned you when you were 6 years old. A lot of emotional baggage tends to come out during that time. Okay, so you go through and you bring it out and you start sorting through it and you figure out what you want to keep and what you want to get rid of. And then you go through what you want to keep, see what you want to keep for quick retrieval and what you want to put more in deep storage. And then at the very end, you start putting everything back in a nice organized fashion so you can find it again later. And then when you get new information, you know where to put it. So everything becomes much more organized. So the patient satisfaction survey, there's been a lot of studies on this one. I will talk a little bit more about brain injury specific, but usually about 92% of the people that go through here found that it was drastically improved, their situation was, and they would recommend it to others. 8% said they had minimal to no change. We were finding a small pattern in diet on that one, so we're still working on that. All right, some of there's a really good study that was published in 2016 by Stephen Curtis, and he talked about all the improvements that occurred after the sensory learning program with the brain injuries. And it goes all the way from reading difficulties, concentration, photophobia, which is sensitivity to light, headaches, spatial misjudgments, imbalance, dizziness, writing difficulty, being able to retrieve memories. Hyperacusis was sounds are too loud. Fatigue, double vision, sleep difficulty, anxiety, and environmental triggers. Look at all of the improvements that occurred on all of these. Somewhere between, it averaged right around 84%. Got better. So I'm going to go through, let's not go through the testimonials too much, just by the fact that I just wanted to say that once you go through the program, you're more responsive to therapy. You can attend better, so you can actually take classes after. and your ability to learn is improved. Okay, I did want to say this one. So this is a former patient. He said, ever since completing the sensory integration program, I feel more focused and less distractible. I also sleep a lot better and don't get frustrated as quickly. I would recommend this to anyone who has problems getting it together after a brain injury. So that's the sensory learning program, the natural solution to brain injuries. If you have any specific questions, I'm going to give you the information here. You can call us at 520-886-8800. You can also contact us at visiontherapy@live.com or check our webpage out at azvisiontherapy.com. If you're not here in Tucson, you can go to sensorylearning.com and find a practitioner near you. And I can't wait to hear from you. Thank you so much. Goodbye.